Hello there, all you amazing people. So I'm going to show you something that is typical of a Linux fan, Linux user, what you will call it, that is super fucking cringy and funny. Before that, subscribe, like, engage that ding-a-ling-ding-ding button, and join my Discord and behave. So I do like to just skim over the comment section in videos I react to see how people are reacting. And you see a lot here where he is engaging and harding. I don't think it could be there, but the vast majority of time where he is engaging, or he or she is engaging, activating, or harding comments is all pro-Linux comments. The second someone is like, yeah, Linux is great, but Windows is better for this thing. Barely no interaction, other than some users will go, or some viewers will go in and defend Linux. This is a really lopsided and really funny not scenario, but symptom is the word I'm looking for, that you've seen a lot of these like unknowledgeable Linux places. Because this is categorically true, okay? Linux is not the fastest, best operating system for every fucking task. Windows is not the best and fastest system for every task. No OS is. Again, this is not just this content creator. Most Linux content creators do that they don't have the capacity to be objective and say, I may not like Windows, but in this instance, it's actually doing really well. That don't take anything away from Linux. It don't make Linux worse. It just means that you can be objective and say, oh yeah, this makes sense. Because here's the thing. Go and Google Linux stability white paper, Linux performances white papers, Linux security white papers. That is industry professionals running Linux versus Windows in laboratories to see if they can find a reproducible test that will back up the claim is Linux X, Y, and Z versus these other things. And of course, you can always find one or two that back up those claims. But most of those white papers, and I've read a lot of them over my years, they all come down to a few things. There is no concrete evidence that Linux is better than Windows or more secure than Windows, other than personal opinion. And that, then if you think about that, just have that as a bookmark in your brain. And then when you see this here, and you see, oh, what is it? I use us, by the way, one sub. I use us, a heart. You know, you barely see a heart in any pro Linux or Windows. There was one. As someone who has been used to Windows, I've been using Linux for 6 months, and depending on what you do, you can use your computer without opening the terminal. No hard or anything there. Here, the most optimized OS is BBC Acon. Again, no hard or comment there because it's not pro Linux. And this is also like, no comment here, but this is also like some games is running faster than Windows. That's a really cherry-picked scenario where the vast majority of games do run better on Windows, but they don't, again, you know. Yeah, Linux is great for browsing the internet and watching YouTube like blah, 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 without paying for YouTube Premium. I don't recommend using ad blockers because you could get your YouTube account banned. But anyway, other than that, Windows 7 gaming and editing PC will stay with me, and I'm happy. Again, no upvote or like or comment. And you see this a lot. Again, it seems like I'm jamming on this content creator. I'm not. A lot of content creators do this that are pro Linux. They are not really good at being objective about the subject. There's lacking a lot in objectivity, in my opinion. A lot of people say that I'm a Linux hater. Okay? I've used Linux for almost 30 years. I've used Windows for over 30 years. I don't use Linux so much anymore because of my work schedule and I'm busy and stuff like that. But I've always had one hardware in my life that ran Linux natively. So right now it's a laptop. Sometimes it would be my computer, and then I would use a laptop for Windows. Or when I ran Mac, it was my laptop. You get the idea here. My problem, or the way that I talk to people about Linux, is way different than how you see people like this in here talks about Linux. I don't tell anyone they should run Linux. I don't expect anyone to not like Windows. I don't expect anyone to blindly just install an OS or program because of a license or seeing the source code or not. Because all of those things don't matter at all in the grand scheme of things. The most important thing is the user. What do they want? What are their requirements? So every time I talk to people, and I've helped a lot of people, I started fucking helping people with computers and got paid for it when I was like 12 years old or 13 years old. And I've always been like, what do you need? What do you expect? Because it's all about the user. And in a lot of instances, that means no Linux. Can't use Linux. Because the program that they want to run is not supported. The peripherals they want to run are not supported. And I'm not going to tell them to use alternative. If you have spent 30 years or spent 10 years in educational institutes to learn a fucking program, I'm not going to tell you to then just disregard that. Use this instead because this is open source. But my whole work life is about this software. This is how I make my money. Too bad. It's your fault for getting proprietary software education. Never going to say that. Never. And I've recommended Linux, I've recommended Windows, I even have recommended Mac OS to people. And here's the thing, another thing you should also, again, why this is super fucking bad for the Linux community that people are doing this. You should not tell people what to do, you give them recommendations. I need a new computer. If you find, again, it can be super, to go back a little bit here, it can be super overwhelming to buy a new laptop. So again, you ask them, what do you need out of your laptop? What is the requirements? What programs are you going to run? Are you going to game? Blah, blah. You ask them a lot of questions. And then you find 3 or 4 or 5 computers in different price ranges. And you explain to them why this cost what it cost. And then it's so much easier for them to make a decision. Or you narrow it down to 2 computers or 3 computers. But you let them make the decision. When I see stuff like this here where you only are embracing things that are backing up your claims, we are getting into the confirmation bias syndrome here. And it also gives the picture. So if I should ask this person for advice, and I'm seeing them primarily only engaging and liking with things that confirm their biases, I would not get a good level-headed advice from them. Because they will give me the advice they would like, what they would like to run. Not what I need, but what they would like to run or think I should run. So if you watch a YouTube video about one thing being better than the other, and you see the creator, the content creator, supporting one side massively more than the other, like exponentially more than the other, you have someone with a massive bias. You have someone that is not interested in giving the consumer, the user, the best possible advice or information. They are interested in backing up their own claims or confirming their own ideas and biases. And again, this is something I see a lot in Linux content creators. They have a massive bias problem. Like, I've never seen it that bad before. And it's really, really, really not a good thing. Because if you're not able to say that a proprietary software or Windows or Mac OS is what someone needs, you have a problem. Because there are such scenarios out there where that's the only option you have. Like it or not, that is how the world works. Because if you don't, you become a dictator. And you become a selfish dictator. And all you care about is boosting your own ego or confirming your own self-perceived superiority about a subject, and you are going to mislead a lot of people. And here's the thing. One angry Linux user infects more people to not use Linux than if you get one angry Linux user will make more non-happy Linux users. And it's way more harder to convert them back to Linux. versus just being real with them. There's a lot of times where I've had to say to people, maybe Linux is not for you right now. At least not as your daily driver. Install it on a laptop and fuck around with it. And then next year, it may be. Those people always come back to me. Versus if I oversell Linux and they get into a lot of problems, I never hear anything from them anymore. That's why this is a problem. I cannot explain how many people, just since I started this YouTube channel, how many people I've talked to that is fed up with Linux for one reason only. They got promised something it didn't deliver. That's simple. I got told this, Y, X, Y, and Z, and that didn't happen. And it was not as good as they said it was, or it was not as seamless as they said it was. And they said I could definitely use this alternative software, and it turned out I definitely can't. I cannot count how many people I have that comes to me like that. And to my friends. Why? Because you get this lopsided, biased approach to Linux in the Linux community. And it's actively hurting Linux. And I wish more content creators would be more level-headed when it comes to Linux content creators. Because nothing is the best for everything. Nothing fits everyone the best. That's like impossible. Like, it's physically impossible to have to be like that. No philosophy is the best for everyone or anyone. No license is the best for everyone and anyone. Or everyone and every scenario, sorry. It can't be. It's impossible. But a lot of Linux creators would like you to think it is. Because for a lot of Linux creators, they don't really care that much about you as an individual. A lot of Linux creators is basically just salespeople, prophets, priests for Linux. So what do I mean by all of those weird words? Is that if you look at a lot of Linux content out there, it's preaching how great it is and stuff like that, which is fine. When you look at it, their main goal is to get more people converted over to Linux. Just like a Jehovah's Witness, a Scientologist is going around giving out flyers and trying to get you into their respective religions. All they care about is get you in the fold. So your personal needs is not even thought about. Because, oh my god, you could have personal needs that didn't align with Linux or FOSS. And they can't have that. We can't have that, bro. Not good, man. And a lot of Linux YouTubers out there is basically just a big, massive door salesman for Linux. They oversell, overhype, antagonistic towards anything non-Linux and FOSS. To be politely here. And that means that they don't give a fuck about your needs or your situation. There are YouTubers out there that have said that if you work for a proprietary company, you cannot be a FOSS advocate and you should leave your job. Not to think about that it's super difficult to find jobs nowadays and you need to fucking pay the bills. And there's more than one that have said that. Instead of showcasing on a technical level what FOSS or Linux could do for you, it is becoming you are either with us or against us. You're either part of the new revolution or you're not. You're either on the right side of history or you're not. So you have to sacrifice. And this is, again, a lot of people say this. A lot of content creators say this in Linux, that you should be willing to sacrifice a lot of things to be a Linux user. Because it's the right thing to do. It's a software. Okay? There is no right thing to do in software. It's like saying you should use this fucking fork because it's the right thing to do. It's a fucking fork. Okay? If it's made out of plastic or metal or whatever the fuck it is, you could debate a little bit environmental impact. But even fucking producing wooden forks have a big environmental impact. You know, they're still having to be transported with fucking big, massive fucking gasoline-consuming trucks and whatnot. You know, it still takes machines that use a lot of electricity that hurts society to make the wooden forks and stuff like that. They may be 1% more better for the environment than a steel fork. But at least you could use a steel fork over and over again. You get the idea here. Mind-boggling the way that the content creators for Linux have morphed into this. And it's fun to see every time you see a new Linux YouTuber. It's always, oh, I did Windows for X, Y, and Z reason, with valid reasons. Great. Then they go into Linux, and then, oh, I like Linux because this and this, valid reasons. And then they slowly become more religious about Linux. They become more of an evangelist and toxic person about Linux, meaning that they're toxic towards anyone that's not part of the Linux cult or the FOSS cult. And they slowly start to do that. It almost always ends up them being basically trying to indoctrinate people into the Linux ways and the FOSS ways. Almost always. You rarely see someone that is a Linux user that will recommend Windows to someone or proprietary software to someone. But they should be able to, because there is people out in the world where that's the case, where you have to recommend Windows or Mac OS or proprietary software. You cannot get away with it, or around it, sorry. And if you try to get around it, that just means that you're not interested in what is the best solution for that person. You're only interested in championing your own cause, any means necessary. I see a lot of Linux creators. I converted so many people over to Linux. I'm like, that's cool. How many of them stuck with Linux? And a lot of them did not. Converting people to use Linux is easy. Getting people to stay with Linux is hard. There is a reason why the average Linux user have only used Linux for 5 to 10 years. You rarely see someone like me that's been using Linux for 26 or 7 years. Most of my life, basically. You rarely see that. Like, I'm a unicorn. Like, you rarely see that. And that is the problem. And that's because they get into the honeymoon phase, they get indoctrinated into the cult, so to speak, and then a few years down the line, when they get all of this out of their system, the honeymoon phase fades away. They get more realistic about Linux and operating systems and software. They almost always end up either dual booting or Mac or Windows. They never stay Linux only. That's really rare. So if people are trying to not get you to use Windows and proprietary software, it's because they're afraid that you stay there. Or you may realize that what they're saying is not really the truth. They're trying to keep you in their fold, basically. And again, that's because Linux has a bias problem. People get so biased about Linux and FOSS that they can't see a lot of the faults it has. And a lot of the limitations it has, that is and will impact a massive amount of people, millions of people, or make it more expensive for them in the long run. And again, this is not just this content creator. You see this a lot with Linux content creators. They ignore the things that don't back their claim up most of the time. They are somewhat willing to engage with a comment if it's like, it's okay it's promoting Linux or saying Linux is good, and then it also give a little bit of credit to Windows, but most of the credit goes, or most of the positivity goes to Linux or FOSS. Then they are willing to engage with it. It's a really interesting thing that's going on with the Linux world, that they have this massive bias problem. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, to the degree that a lot of content creators that do Linux content cannot give you good advice anymore. Because no matter what you ask them, the advice will always be FOSS and Linux. You don't even have to ask them, because that's what they're going to say. You know it by looking at their content. Which is super fucking sad. See you all later. Bye bye.